Welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. We're here today with our Wellness and Weight Loss Wednesday here on the Cabral Concept. Appreciate you tuning in. Today will hopefully be a great one for you, where we look at two different parameters. The first one being late night eating, and the second one being a high-fat diet combined into one study to look at what it does to overall fat tissue, basically weight gain, and could it cause detrimental long-term effects. So I want to break down this study. It literally just came out about 30 days ago. So this is current, this is up to date. And I want to share with you, I think, some of the things that we have to have caution with while going through this study, and definitely some areas that I don't think we should continue to overlook. Really, again, like I know a lot of people like to twist the truth in order to promote a particular agenda, something that they like to do, right? But here on the Cabral Concept, we really want to stick to what is true, what's always been true, and what will always continue to be true, right? So it's not like the science of the moment. It's what have we been talking about in Ayurvedic medicine, in traditional Chinese medicine for 6,000 years, right? 3,000 for traditional Chinese medicine, about 6,000 for Ayurvedic medicine. All right. So let's take that. What do they say? Now, let's say, okay, this is what they say, right? They've said it for 6,000 years. It's still held up. Okay, but now what does modern day medical scientific research also say? And if they're saying the same thing, I think that's when we really need to pay attention, right? Now, if Ayurveda is saying one thing, modern medical science is saying another, who's right? I'm not willing to bet on necessarily either one right away. Every time I've gone against ancient Ayurvedic wisdom, I've typically been wrong, so I don't usually go against them. But however, things are not always understood in the same light because the texts, they were written differently. They use different vernacular, right? Different terms. So I like to be able to correlate the two. So I really want to always look at the science, and then I want to say, hey, does this match up? And if so, what can we learn from that? So that's what I want to take you through today. Let's give you the exact title of this study. And of course, I'm going to link it up for you. If you want to head on over to stephencabral.com/1993, I'll link that up. And it's called Cellular and Physiological Circadian Mechanisms Drive Diurnal Cell Proliferation and Expansion of White Adipose Tissue. You might say, I have no idea what any of that means. I'm going to translate the medical speak, the jargon, into normal everyday talk. So cellular and physiological circadian mechanisms. That means the things that happen within our body when it's light out, and then also certain things that happen in our body that only happen when it's dark out, right? The repair and the wake up, right? Part of that mechanism, right? So like, for example, during the first part of the day, we have a rise in norepinephrine, a rise in cortisol. That's called the cortisol awakening response about 2 hours after we wake up. And then it starts to slowly decline over the entire day. And it's at its lowest peak a couple hours after the sun sets, typically right around 9:30 p.m. Of course, that is somewhat seasonal. All right. So that's the first part of that. And then, drive diurnal cell proliferation and expansion of white adipose tissue. Okay, diurnal just means two, right? So 2 parts of the day, waking and evening dark hours. For this study, we're looking at what happens overnight when the body is supposed to be sleeping or at rest, but we are eating at that same time. All right, so let's take a look at the study. It was published in Nature Communications just about 30 days ago. And it was done at the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston. And that's it. So let's get into it. So the summary, let's go over this. It was changing your eating habits or altering your circadian clock. That means eating when it's dark out instead of just when it's light, can impact healthy fat tissue throughout your lifespan. According to a preclinical study published today in Nature by researchers with the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston. And I'm going to give you a little summary. Healthy fat tissues help provide energy, support cell growth, protect organs, and keep the body warm. A good quality diet and one that is consumed in a rhythmic manner, eating during our active cycle during the day, is important in maintaining healthy fat, the researchers found. Adipocyte, whenever you hear adipocyte, it just means fat. That's all. It's a fat cell. Progenitor cells, progenitor just means like the parent cells, right? So adipocyte, progenitor cells, you'll hear that a bit. It's basically like they're the originators, right? Mature into adipocytes. So they mature into fat cells. The healthy fat cells that make up our adipose tissue, which stores energy as fat. Researchers discovered that adipocyte progenitors undergo rhythmic daily proliferation throughout the 24-hour cycle under normal patterns of energy intake. However, when investigators introduced a high-fat diet or changed the temporal patterns of food consumption so that mice ate equal increments of food during both the sleep and the wake phase, this 24-hour pattern of pre-adipocyte proliferation was destroyed. This is very important. We're going to get into it even more. Quoted from the study, we found that when we fed mice a high-fat diet, it increased the proliferation of pre-adipocytes and destroyed its rhythmic pattern. Let's see, it goes on. What we project is that over the course of our lifetime, these 24-hour variations in the proliferation of these cells is really important in maintaining healthy fat. Throwing off the circadian rhythm and eating a high-fat diet over time will deplete healthy fat cells. The study suggests that this disruption may be difficult to reverse. Depletion of adipocyte progenitor cells will not allow healthy new adipocytes to be made within the tissue, ultimately causing defects in fat storage and excess lipids spilling over into other organs, such as the liver and muscle. Having fat in these areas can lead to type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. Last paragraph. In an ideal world, everyone would maintain a normal sleep-wake cycle and not eat during the wrong hours of the day. So not too late before bed or early in the morning. You should also steer away from high-fat diets, which we have now shown destroys the rhythmic proliferation of our pre-adipocytes. The 24-hour clock we have is important when it comes to our healthy fat, and we need to protect it as much as we can. All right, we're going to keep it at that, and now we're going to dissect this study. So you might be saying to yourself, well, it looks like eating a high-fat diet and eating basically after dinner during the dark hours, or just your dinner might be 10 o'clock at night, during eating when it's dark out, when we're supposed to be winding down, could lead to what? Well, it looks like a destruction of healthy fat stores. And you might say to yourself, well, yeah, I want to destroy my fat stores, right? Like that's the positive. I want to destroy them. I want to get rid of them. Well, we have to be careful with that, because they found that even people that have had liposuction, so liposuction, let's say around your belly, right, around your stomach, that when your body is looking to store fat, it's still going to store fat somewhere, right? You can't trick your body, right? We always think that, oh, with all of our modern medical advances, we're gonna trick the body this time, right? That's why we have to be careful with super high level dosage of even nutritional supplements for a long period of time. I'm a huge advocate of nutritional supplements. They help me get well, because when my digestion was poor and I had all sorts of gut issues and adrenal issues, all that, no doubt about it, nutritional supplements were the thing, and I still take a lot of nutritional supplements to this day. However, what I don't recommend is high-dose nutritional supplements, right, over a long period of time. You might need them in the short term, right? You might need to boost those, whatever vitamin it might be, but not in the long term, right? Like not 10,000 IUs of vitamin D every day. Probably more like 2,000 to 4,000 IUs every day for adults. Not 20 grams of vitamin C every day, probably more like 1 to 3 grams of vitamin C. And when you get sick, you can boost that, right? B vitamins, 50 to 100 milligrams a day, not 500 milligrams a day, right? So it's like, they're important, but we don't want to overdo it, right? And so our fats are important, but we don't want to overdo it. And when we try to think that we're going to trick our body, well, our body says, not so fast. You know, we have a different plan in mind. So now the lipids are there. They're having a difficult time being stored in other healthy fat cells. So where are they going? Well, they're ending up in the liver, which could lead to what? A lot of people dealing with non-alcoholic fatty liver, right? Or fatty liver. So we have to really look at that. That's very, very important. Or visceral fat, where we might have fat mixing in with the organs or even intertwined with muscle tissue. So this is, I think, extremely important to look at because the fat that is accumulated in the liver or around organs is far more dangerous than what's called subcutaneous body fat. So I think this is really important to look at that. Remember, you can't trick your body. Of course, we don't want to have a lot of body fat on our body because we know that it leads to all the major causes of death. And there are 4 major causes of death. There's heart disease, there's high blood pressure and stroke, one and the same. There's diabetes, right? Blood sugar issues, type 2 diabetes is what we're talking about. And then there's cancer. And being more than a 25 on your BMI is going to potentially lead to a greater risk in all 4 of those areas. So again, I'm not here to tell you your ideal body type for you. That's not my job. That's your decision. And I'm here to support you either way. That's the truth. But I can tell you that if you're 20, 30 pounds more than your ideal body weight, you are increasing your risk for all-cause mortality, and that is true. So again, I want to be careful with this, and obviously we work with tens of thousands of people a year just on helping them lose weight the healthy way. So I get it, I understand it, but that's why I'm also trying to bring you the research, because in this particular experiment, and there was about 4 different experiments within this, and again, I'm going to link it up for you. I have the studies actually right in front of me. So there was 2 different feeds for these mice, and you might say, "Oh, mouse study is not the same as human." Well, they're pretty close. They really are, right? They're able to do these mice studies really well. I do have to admit that, yes, of course, I'd love to see more human studies, but some of this is so detrimental that you might not want it to be done to mice, but you definitely don't want it done in humans. So you need to do these things first with mice rather than humans. That's for sure, because you would not want to induce fatty liver in a human, right? That's not good. And they're looking like some of this might be irreversible. Now, I don't agree with that. I believe that we can reverse it, no doubt about it, because we know how to get rid of visceral fat. We know how to help with non-alcoholic fatty liver. We know how to help with alcoholic fatty liver for sure. So we can do that. So again, have no fear. The irreversible, I'm not buying that at all. I think we can change those adipocytes back. It's going to take some time, right? Stop crash dieting, stop over fasting. We intermittent fast. We do that normally. And we work with our body's natural circadian rhythm. So 2 things. First, I want to qualify this. One diet was 13% fat. One diet was 60% fat. Okay? So this is important to look at that. 60% fat, getting really more towards 70% fat. That's where a lot of people are on with a low-carb, keto-based diet. They're closer to 70%. That's certainly a high-fat diet. I don't recommend that over the long term. In the short term, I don't have too much of an issue with it, but short term for me is sub 30 days. So just because, again, as a clinician, as someone that runs labs on thousands of people every month, I can tell you that especially more detrimentally towards women, we start to see cortisol levels rise, estrogen dominance, and thyroid begin to lower, which certainly is hurting the metabolism, right? And this especially goes for people as they start to get into their 30s and certainly 40s, 50s, and beyond. So we have 2 different diets, one 13% fat, one 60% fat. I would make an argument that 13% is too low and 60% is too high for normal everyday living, right? Normal everyday living. So I think it's right. It's closer in the middle. However, that's not what this study did. Now, the interesting thing is this. I want to give the higher fat diet because, again, I'm unbiased. I really am. So I always say this. I have no dog in the race. It doesn't matter to me if a diet should be 60% or 30% or whatever it might be. But I can tell you, again, based on all the clinical research, there are certain parameters. So what I'm saying to you is this. I think that what mattered more in this study was that people were eating a high-fat diet during the wrong hours of the day. Almost certainly, I can assure you of that. Almost certainly. Because there are multiple studies that have done before. And again, they talk about this in Ayurveda. You have to stop eating after the sun goes down. That's basically it. So in the summer, can you eat a little bit later? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Why? Your eyes and skin are literally taking in light. They are telling your body, it's still light out. We can still be active. Oh, and we're consuming food. Why do we consume food? We consume food for energy. That's why we're doing it. Oh, sun is setting. Do we need to consume more food now for energy? The answer is no. Now we go into repair mode. What happens in nature, right? So my daughter, she brought in a tiger lily. We're growing tiger lilies in the backyard. Big, beautiful plant. They're orange. It's beautiful, right? So she brings it in. It's fully open. During the day when she clips one and she brings it in a nice little vase for my wife. Really nice of her to do. Okay. So then what happens at night? The tiger lily closes, right? It closed up. What is it doing? Self-repair. It closes itself up. What happens when the sun rises? The tiger lily, like many flowers, begin to open up. What are they doing? Well, they are now eating. What are they eating? Sunlight. They're using photosynthesis. They are literally taking in the light as energy. We as humans are not that different from nature. We are meant to be a part of nature. We eat after the sun rises. We stop eating when the sun sets. For most people, it's somewhere between 7, 8 a.m. to about 5, 6 p.m., maybe 7 p.m. closer towards the summer. But the goal is to stop eating for somewhere around 12, maybe 14, maybe 16 hours a day, because that allows our body to then rest, repair, not have to use energy for digestion, burn body fat overnight, believe it or not, at the greatest percentage that it will for the day. Not greatest amount, but greatest percentage, because our heart rate will be lower. Our hormones like norepinephrine will be lower, right? Glucocorticoids will be lower. We're tapping into body fat while we're sleeping if we're not eating all of this food at night. So this is really important research to look at it. I don't know that the results would be exactly the same if they did a 60% fat diet, but those people were only eating from, let's say, 8 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. I don't think you would see this. I really don't. So I would love to see a follow-up study. Again, this just came out 30 days ago, but I'd love to see a follow-up study on a high-fat diet. Not that I'm promoting a high-fat diet, but I want to be fair, right? I want to be unbiased. So I'd love to see a high-fat diet, the same 60%, but this time, the mice were only eating from 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock, right? So that's, what would that be in that window? So they've got 10 hours or so there. So it's a 16-hour fast, right? Is that correct? My brain is not working while I'm on the podcast at the same time. It's somewhere around there, right? So 10 hours, but we could even do it 12 hours. So most intermittent fasts are considered somewhere around 12 hours. So why don't we just do eating at 6, stopping eating at 6 at night? So I'd love to see that. Keep the high-fat diet in there. You could do a low-fat if you wanted to, but really that versus eating during the night, I don't think you'd see it. I think what matters the most is that we should not be eating when nature has told us to be winding down and basically going to bed. Because remember, take away your electricity, take away all these different smart devices, take away your lights in your house. Trust me, a couple hours after the sun goes down, you're going to do what? You're going to bed. And the reason is that there's nothing left to do. Take away fire, right? Because humans were around a long time before that. So what are you doing? Well, you're hiding, right? So that you don't become prey for a nocturnal animal, right? Because we're not nocturnal. And you're waking up with the sun because you don't have necessarily a roof or anything like that to block out the light. So natural circadian rhythm is going to dictate when you would typically be eating and not eating anyway. So hopefully this was helpful. Again, take from it. These are all only research, but I want you to always be up and aware on what the latest is. Hopefully it's helpful. I'd love to hear your comments as well. Feel free to leave those on Instagram or YouTube. I do check them all out. And if this show is helpful, please do feel free to pass it along to anyone else you believe it could serve. Take care, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning into today's show. And before you go, I want to make sure that you know that this is the very last week of our semi-annual sale. That means that after this week, prices go back to their normal everyday price over at Equilife, and your ability to save up to 25% off store-wide goes away. So definitely head on over to equi.life and save up to 25% on your favorite nutritional supplements, wellness protocols, detoxes, at-home labs, and so much more. Plus, all this week, you'll be able to tune in for daily deals that are only found by heading on over to Equilife. That is equi.life. Check it out for up to 25% off this week while supplies last. Take care.